For many baby boomers, the perfect retirement is all about simplicity. Oftentimes, their goals don't include things like cruises, trips abroad, or even vacation homes. Some baby boomers want less of everything. In other words, as I like to say, they plan to retire small. But retiring small doesn't always mean retiring cheaply, or at least as cheaply as some people may believe. There are some unique challenges to consider, and we'll be covering those on today's show. It's now time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional style investing to your portfolio. Hello, I'm David Scranton. You know, as baby boomers, we've lived through some pretty stressful times. We've had to adapt to major social and technological changes, not to mention some huge financial challenges, all during our prime working years. So it's no wonder many boomers dream of retiring small, of downsizing to the bare minimum and living really a much simpler life. There's a lot of appeal to many people with this idea, but it's important to understand that a small, simple retirement doesn't mean the planning process can also be simple. You know, earlier this year, we did a show about the potential dangers of complacency among retirees and near retirees who think, I've got plenty. Well, complacency is just as great a danger among those who think, I don't need too much during retirement, which is a mindset some people fall into when their retirement goals are relatively small and simple. We'll talk about how to avoid that pitfall and others on today's show. Helping us out will be personal finance expert and host of A&E's Big Spender, Larry Winget, and author Hyrum Smith. But first, let's explore some of the more popular options among people wanting to, as I say, retire small. You know, for most people, one of the first and biggest questions about retirement they struggle with is, where? So, if you think about it, while some decide that the place in which they had their career and raised their family is the best answer, many people, though, make a change. That's especially true amongst those whose retirement goals are to downsize and live simply. In fact, in most cases, the house you raise your family in is much more suited to a family than it is to a couple or an individual after kids have grown and moved out of the home. Everything about it now seems too big. The lawn, the rooms, and yes, also the bills. Everything from the utilities to the property tax seems too big. You want something smaller, possibly in a place warmer, definitely something less expensive. That's generally true for most people, whether retirement goals are simple or extravagant. But if your goals are small and simple, then choosing the right location is especially important. Not only do you want someplace affordable, but you want someplace well suited to your personal needs and interests. For example, perhaps it's a place with plenty of options for boating or fishing, or a rural area good for gardening, or perhaps a community with an active art scene and lots of cultural offerings. The point is that you want someplace unlikely ever to give you cause to regret retiring small. Why? Because everything you're interested in and enjoy is right there in your own backyard. But again, it also needs to be affordable. So how do you find that perfect spot? Well, fortunately, there are many publications online and resources that specialize in keeping track of the nation's most affordable retirement-friendly cities and communities. Typically, the compilers of these lists take into account a wide variety of factors, including the overall cost of living, housing costs, taxes, availability of health care, economic vitality, geographic and cultural diversity, and of course, climate. And you might be surprised by some of the places that frequently end up on these lists. In fact, reviewing them can open your eyes to certain cities and areas of the country you might never have considered to be retirement options. For example, Tucson, Arizona, Nashville, Tennessee, Charlotte, North Carolina, and San Antonio, Texas are a few of the cities that have made some of the most recent lists of affordable, retirement-friendly cities. Others may include Boise, Idaho, Bend, Oregon, and even Tampa, Florida. Whether any of these locations on these lists appeal to you will obviously depend on your individual goals and priorities. However, if your small retirement plans include an apartment or a small house in a place you know will satisfy your personal wants, needs, and interests, these places typically offer much more affordable options than you could find in major cities like Boston or retirement hotspots like Naples or Myrtle Beach. Of course, affordable doesn't mean free. The 2018 median rental price for a two-bedroom apartment nationally is $1,160 per month, according to apartmentlist.com. And obviously, the nicer the place and the more popular the area, the higher the costs. So even for a small, simple retirement, the upfront income need for housing can be significant. Of course, there are other options beside apartments and small houses. For example, as you may know, a popular trend in recent years has been something called the tiny house. And these tiny houses have become increasingly popular among retirees looking to keep things small and simple. According to industry estimates, as much as 40% of the market for tiny houses is made up of people over the age of 50. If anything, that percentage is expected to grow as more boomers enter retirement and explore more affordable lifestyles. In a way, the tiny house epitomizes that baby boomer ideal we talked about at the top of the show. A simplified life that enables you to significantly reduce your living expenses while giving you the option to stay put or be more mobile, whichever you prefer. Of course, for all their apparent charm and appeal, the tiny house life obviously isn't for everyone, and that includes even those who know their goal is a small, simple retirement. Nor is it as affordable as you might think at first glance. Even mid-range tiny homes cost between $20,000, and that's for a do-it-yourself model, and perhaps $40,000. Plus, there are plenty of other expenses to go along with them. If you choose to put the house on a foundation, for example, you're most likely going to have to buy land or pay rent to use it. If you plan to keep the house mobile, you'll obviously need a vehicle powerful enough to tow it, along with all the gas and maintenance costs that come with owning it. On the road, you'll need to make sure you park your house in approved and appropriate locations. RV parks with utility hookups are the easiest options. Some have even begun setting aside sections for tiny homes with fees that can range from $25 to $75 a night, all the way up to $400 per month. The bottom line is this. Even the seemingly smallest, simplest retirement plan may require more income than you think, which is why falling into the mindset of, gee, I don't need much, can be such a dangerous pitfall. Is there a way to figure out just how much you'll need to save to achieve your simple retirement goals? Well, in fact, there is, and we'll talk more about that in just a bit. We're excited to welcome back to the show our friend, Larry Winget, who's known as the pit bull of personal development. Larry's the author of 6 national bestsellers, the host of A&E's Big Spender, and a veteran of thousands of other TV and stage appearances. He specializes in personal, financial self-help and uses a tough love approach to help everyday Americans take charge of their financial future. Larry, welcome back to The Income Generation.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. Thanks.
So do you find, as I do, that most people when they retire really want to live a simple retirement? Most people don't want to buy a second home or buy a boat or anything like that. Is that just me, or do you see the same thing?
No, it's just you.
No, okay.
I'm serious. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Oh, okay.
And I have people around me who are retired buying multi-million-dollar homes.
Oh.
And so I'm not buying into the fact that when people retire, they want to live more simply. I see people spending way too much money in retirement for some silly reason.
Well, you go to dinner on any given restaurant on a Monday night. Heck, you can go to McDonald's on a Monday night in Scottsdale, and you see Rolls Royces and Bentleys parked outside. So take yourself out of the realm of Scottsdale for just a moment.
Okay.
As I take myself out of the realm of Southern Florida, we have the same thing here. We're talking today about our show about those people specifically who want to do something we call retiring small. In other words, they want to shed as many fixed expenses as they can, downsize their home and everything else. Not because they want to retire cheaply, but because they want to be able to spend that money on things that bring them passion in life, be it travel, be it spoiling grandchildren, and things like that. So
There you
put
go.
yourself in that mindset for just a moment here. And, you know, what do you find today are people's biggest decisions and hardest decisions they have to make when they retire in terms of whether the dollar goes here or whether the dollar goes there? And how do people make those decisions outside of Southern Florida and outside of Scottsdale, Arizona?
All right, we'll remove all those places and talk about regular folks in the rest of the country then. Here's the biggest problem I'm seeing is that people want to retire more simply, and they do want to cut back on all those other kinds of expenses. However, I saw a study recently that said that almost 2/3 of baby boomers, people approaching retirement, some of them already in retirement, are financially supporting their millennial children in some way. So the first thing that you have to shed is the dependent children that are grown and should be taking care of themselves. That would be where I would start.
Now, some would say to you, gosh, Larry, that's easier said than done. You know, Papa might say, kick the kids out of the house so we can go on more cruises. But Mama's going to say, there are kids, we're not going to do that. So,
Mama's wrong.
okay, that's simple. Mama's wrong. Well,
Mama's wrong. Here's the deal. The goal of parenting is for them to go away. So you should have raised your kids with the ability to thrive and survive on their own at some point in their life. And to support them while sacrificing your own retirement, I think is sad and does your kids a disservice.
Sure.
And it does a disservice to your spouse who you worked hard to get to the place where you're finally able to say, let's not go to work anymore. We're not in a place where we can bring in any new revenue, generate any new revenue, and we're going to enjoy our lives. And you can't do that when you have so many things that are dragging you down. And that's just a place to start.
Fair enough. Providing the children don't have any disabilities of sorts, you can push them out, kick them out of the nest, if you will, make them fly on their own, and they might be stronger because of it. But how about the members of the sandwich generation who have the opposite problem, who are caring for parents? You know, in the 60 seconds or so we have left in the segment, how do you handle that? That's not as easy.
That's not as easy. That really isn't as easy, and I will totally agree with you on that. I'm much more sad for people who are that sandwich generation, and they're stuck between both sides, and now they're stuck with aging parents, and they have to do whatever it takes. And that's your mom and your daddy out there. You need to do what it takes. You know, there's only two ways to have more money, and that's increase income or decrease expenses. So you're going to have to go somewhere else to offset your expenses so you're able to take care of your aging parents.
Yeah, really simple. And you're right, you either have to work longer or cut other expenses and be more conservative in other places.
Yep.
Or if you're in a place where you feel pretty confident that there'll be an inheritance down the road, which I always get nervous depending on, then you know, maybe that helps. But so Larry, you have held true here to be the pit bull of personal finances and having the tough love approach, telling people to kick the birdies out of the nest. I love it. Stay with us, Larry. We'll be back for another segment. And you stay with us too, our Income Generation viewers. A lot more in terms of words of wisdom for our good friend, Larry Winget. Now, some of you might recall earlier this year we did a show all about how to answer the question, how much do I need to retire? And the answer is different for everyone, of course. But the process of figuring out the answer should include some common steps, even for those with the smallest and simplest of retirement goals. The approach that I recommend starts with something I call a top-down financial analysis. In other words, instead of adding up your expected retirement expenses from the bottom up, instead, start by identifying the expenses and contributions that you expect to go away once you're retired. So let's say, for example, you're earning $100,000 a year pre-tax while working. How much of that $100,000 is going into your 401k? How much of it is going toward FICA tax? If you add up those expenses, both because those expenses are both things that will go away after you retire. If you add them up and subtract them from the $100,000, now you see that retirement need number starting to drop. Now, what if you expect to have your mortgage paid off once you retire? Then you can subtract that monthly payment as well. Just make sure that for every subtraction you make, you determine whether it's pre-tax or post-tax. Post-tax expenses, such as the FICA deduction and car payments, will need to be grossed up for income taxes. Why? because an expense of $700 a month might actually cost you $1,000 a month before tax in order to net $700 to pay that expense. The point of top-down approach is this. Since you already know what your current income feels like, simply by subtracting the expenses you're not going to carry into retirement, you get a really good feeling for how much the same basic lifestyle will cost after you retire. And very often the answer comes as a pleasant surprise. By the time you've subtracted now all of these expenses and obligations you won't have after retirement, you might realize that the $100,000 you're making now can be reduced to, let's say $70,000 per year of pre-tax income with no negative impact on your current lifestyle. And let's be clear, most people planning for even what we call a small, simple retirement don't intend to make drastic changes to their lifestyle. The point of retiring small for most people actually is not to live more frugally. It's to live and to enjoy the things in life that they like the most. Quite the opposite of living frugally. The point is to scale away the excess, to get rid of as much baggage as possible so you can devote more time, attention, and money to the things in life that are fulfilling and that give you pleasure. For most people, that baggage is mental, logistical, and financial. And a big house encompasses all three of those, which is why most people like to downsize at or near retirement. So that's why a top-down budget analysis is a perfect step for determining how much you'll need to retire. You can deduct a lot of that financial baggage right off the top. Your big mortgage bill, big property tax bill, big utility bills, home maintenance bills, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, now, none of those are going to disappear completely. And the income you'll need for even modest housing that allows you to maintain your lifestyle you're accustomed to is often more than most people realize, as we discussed a few moments ago. And that leads us to the important next step for determining how much you'll need for your simple retirement goals. That is identifying exactly what those goals are and how much those goals are likely to cost in retirement. Now, we've talked about some of the options and possibilities at the top of the show. A small apartment in an affordable city or community that suits your needs and lifestyle, buying or renting a small house, or even purchasing a tiny house if you're more adventuresome. The point is, once you sit down to identify your retirement goals, it's time to get as specific as possible. If you don't have a new home or location identified yet, then at least try to narrow it down a little bit in terms of the options available and give yourself a yearly budget based upon perhaps even just median housing costs, living expenses, and taxes in those areas. Now, if you plan to increase your favorite pastimes and activities, you need to calculate roughly how much that will add to your current expense each year. Really visualize the retirement you want and try to think of everything. Once you have a rough idea of how much it's going to cost to live smaller and to pursue your goals each year, you can measure the total alongside the results of your top-down analysis. And let's stick with the example of $70,000. After your top-down analysis and subtracting all the expenses that will go after retirement, you've determined you'll be able to live that same basic lifestyle for $70,000 instead of $100,000 that it requires today. So now the question becomes, will that $70,000 still be sufficient now that you've added up the cost of achieving your retirement goals? If so, how much of it will need to come from your savings and your investments? To answer that next question, you need to calculate and identify your other sources of retirement income, such as pensions and Social Security benefits. Although a qualified financial advisor can help you maximize your Social Security benefits, you can get an initial rough idea of how much you can expect to receive by using the retirement estimator available at socialsecurity.gov. Once you've added up all your additional income sources, pensions, and Social Security, now measure that total against the number you came up with after doing your top-down financial analysis and calculating the cost of your goals. So for example, let's say you've done all that and you've determined that you'll need your savings investments, even after accounting for pensions and Social Securities, to generate $40,000 a year in income to have the retirement you want. $40,000 from investments. So now the next question is, how much money will I need in a lump sum at retirement to generate that $40,000 a year? Now that's a slightly trickier question because it depends not only on how you invest your money, but also on your longevity. In other words, it's important not just to identify a lump sum, but to have an asset allocation that helps ensure it won't be depleted before death. Now, I'll talk more about how to approach that process in just a bit and share some more tips for achieving the small, simple retirement that you might very well desire. Right now, let's welcome back one of the income generation's good friends, Larry Winget. Larry, you've written a book more recently, and I want to make sure I get this straight here, entitled, What's Wrong with Damn Near Everything? Why is it I have to cuss on television just to read the title of your book, Larry? What's wrong with damn near everything? How the collapse of core values is destroying us and how to fix it. Now, this happens to be a topic near and dear to my heart because my book, Return on Principle, talks about core values in the subtitle also. So tell me, what is it you think that's all screwed up today about people's core values?
You know, there's so much. We talk about honesty. If I went out and asked every parent, do you believe that your kids should always tell the truth or always tell you the truth? They would say, absolutely. I want my kids to be honest. And yet 27% of Americans cheat on their taxes. So we've made our core values conditional. We've made them situational. Tell me the truth, but not if it saves me a little bit of money on my taxes. I think that's wrong. When you look at honesty, let's look at our politicians. Do they tell us the truth? If we're voting for people who are dishonest, then the core value of honesty doesn't mean much to us. Those are just a couple of examples about core values. I think the values of honesty, integrity, a strong work ethics, kindness, just flat out being a nice person, I think we're seeing those destroyed every single day. We don't have much respect for people anymore. And that shows up in so many areas of society.
It's funny,
I wrote today, go ahead.
I would say two of my core values are in line with yours. I call it diligence instead of work ethic, and I call it honesty. But it seems to me like the most difficult thing when it comes to honesty is people being honest with themselves. You know, can I really afford to retire at this rate? Not whether or not people can do the math. It's a question of being honest with themselves. Am I saving enough? Am I going to be okay? So in the final minute or so we have in this segment, tell me, how do you get people to be, if anybody could do it, you can, but how do you get people to be honest, brutally honest with themselves?
Well, when it comes to money, money is very simple in my opinion. It's logical, it's not emotional, and anything that's logical can be tracked. So people should get out a sheet of paper and pencil and write down where they are. I've been working with people in their finances for a lot of years, and I've yet to find anybody at any income level who knew exactly how much they earned or had on hand and exactly who they owed and who they owed it to. So when you get a good grasp on your finances and you can look at them on a sheet of paper in black and white, that's the time to get brutally honest. And it's when you also can start to track your expenses to say, did I really need that? Do I need to keep spending in this way? Have I let my appetites outgrow my money? And that happens a lot. So it's time to get honest, but you can't do that when you're only using your mind. You have to know, and you only know when you write it down.
Sounds like tough love all over again. Larry, thanks for being with us today. I really appreciate it. Most of us would probably love to live to a ripe old age as long as we can remain in relatively good health and are enjoying our quality of life. It's actually part of the motivation many people have for wanting a small, simple retirement. Scaling back your possessions, your obligations, your financial burdens helps decrease the stress level as well. And this is widely known to improve overall health. You know, the good news is that people are living longer today than ever before. If you're a regular viewer, you've heard me quote this statistic before from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. For a couple in their 60s today, there is about a 50% chance, 50% chance, that at least one of them, if not both, will make it into their 90s. Unfortunately, that good news is also potentially bad news where retirement planning is concerned. At least it presents a challenge unique to this generation because this generation living longer and longer now means that they have to plan, we have to plan, for retirement of up to 30 years. That's why, as I've discussed earlier, longevity combined with your asset allocation is such a critical factor in determining the lump sum necessary to generate the income you'll need to meet your goals. And this is once you've made the determination, of course, about your goals. Now, some people might think it's as simple as the longer you expect to live after retirement, the bigger lump sum you need. And that's part of the equation, but that's not necessarily the entire story once you factor in your asset allocation. So let's break it down. Most people are aware of the 4% rule, which says that for average investors, the most they can draw from their retirement accounts each year without running out of money is 4%. What most people don't realize, though, is that there's a recent study by a top mutual fund family, actually mutual fund rating agency, that concluded that in today's economic environment, a safe withdrawal rate for average investors now stands at just 2.8%. This study was based on the well-known Monte Carlo analysis, which seeks to identify a figure that gives you a 90% chance of success. And in this case, success simply means not running out of money. Now, 90% sounds pretty good, but let's keep it in the right perspective. The study is saying that even at only a 2.8% withdrawal rate, there's still a 10% chance of depleting your assets. Why? Because if you're withdrawing money from your accounts to meet your income needs, even at that low rate, you're depending on the markets to grow and to replace these withdrawals. But of course, the markets fluctuate, sometimes dramatically, as we've seen in these last few months. And as we saw back in the early 2000s, and again from 2007 to 2009, when the stock market plunged by 50 and 60% respectively, that can happen again. And after the age of 50, you start to lose the luxury of time to recoup those kinds of losses. That's why, as I've stressed many times on this show, taking income from principal, or I should say taking withdrawals, within 10 or 15 years of retirement is a slippery slope. If, for example, you're selling shares from a mutual fund every year to meet your income needs, you end up cannibalizing your account. Why? Because now you have to sell more shares when the market's down to get the same amount of money. Now, this brings us back to the longevity factor and why it's such an important variable when determining the lump sum needed. You know, cannibalizing your assets may not matter if you only live 10 years into retirement. But if you live longer and you're part of the majority, then the question of your running out of money becomes a race against time. And oh, by the way, remember the example where we determined $40,000 was the amount of income we need our lump sum to generate in order to meet our simple retirement goals? Well, if you're allocated in such a way that you're taking 2.8% in annual interest to meet that income need, simple math indicates you need a lump sum of about $1.5 million at 2.8% to get you that $40,000 a year. A whole $500,000 more than if you could generate 4%. So, on the other hand, if you had your allocation set up properly so you could stay closer to that old 4% rule, then yes, that $1.5 million becomes $500,000 less. A cool level $1 million. The bottom line is this. Whether your retirement plans are simple or extravagant, your top two priorities should really be the same. Protecting your principal and reliably generating enough income through interest and dividends to meet those goals. How do you do that? And what are some other contingencies you need to be prepared for? We'll talk about that in just a bit. So now it's time to introduce our next guest, Hyrum Smith. He's one of the original creators of the popular Franklin Day Planner, the former chairman and CEO of the Franklin Covey Corporation, and the recognized father of time management. Hyrum's written a great book for today's topic, The Purposeful Retirement, How to Bring Happiness and Meaning to Your Retirement. So tell me, Hyrum, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, David.
You're very welcome. But first of all, tell me what motivated you to write this book?
Well, that's really an interesting story. This woman that used to work with me at Franklin has helped me do quite a few of my books over the years. And she approached me and she says, we want you to write a book about purposeful retirement. We've already got a title for you. Would you write a book called Purposeful Retirement? And I said, her name is Annie. And I said, Annie, why would I write a book like that? I haven't retired yet. And she said, that's why we want you to read the book.
Sounded like she was trying to kick you out of the organization to me, but hopefully that wasn't the case.
I've been out of the organization for a long time. We're still good friends. And I told her, I said, you know, I just celebrated the 24th anniversary of my 50th birthday. Why would I be talking about retirement?
That's right. Why even consider that at this point, right? You know, it's
Right.
funny, as you know, our show today, the concept is about, we call, retiring small, simplifying your life, living as simply as you can so you have money left over for all the things that bring you pleasure. So this is, I know, for the most part, in line with your basic philosophy about retirement, but tell us more about this.
Well, it's interesting. We we discovered a model a lot of years ago. We call it the belief window model, and it's about how we get beliefs in our belief system on what matters to us and what gives us value. And one of the beliefs that a lot of people get in their belief system is that my self-worth is dependent on my job, or my self-worth is dependent on my stuff. And if you believe that, then you're going to acquire a lot of stuff. And if you believe that your whole self value as a human being is tied into what you do for a living, then all of a sudden, you're asked to retire and you're a mess.
Yeah.
In fact, I tell a story in the book. I was giving a talk once, and this guy came up. This guy looked like he could be the CEO of any company in America, a very distinguished guy, graying at the temples. And he said, Hyrum, I'm an American Airlines pilot. And he said, I was forced to retire a year ago when I was 60 years old.
Okay.
He said, when they took my wings off, my whole life ended. And I said, you're kidding. I said, is that the only thing that gave you value? And he says, well, not anymore. I'm going to change my belief system. But it just destroyed him.
So how do you change your belief system then? There's a lot of people in our generation that are workaholics, so to speak. I, for example, even get a lot of value from being what most people feel is a financial guru. It brings pride to me. So how do you fix that? How do you rewire your brain?
Well, I think you have to ask a question. You got to remember that your belief system drives your behavior. And what the question you need to ask yourself is, will the results of my behavior, whatever I'm doing right now or however I'm feeling right now, will the results of my behavior meet my needs over time? And if the answer to that question is no, David, then I've got a bad belief. I've got something wrong in my belief system. And so I've got to go back and reevaluate. Why am I so depressed now that I'm retired? And will being depressed about being retired meet my needs over time? The answer is no.
Yeah.
So why not? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you. I talk a lot about people. I say there's a difference between values and beliefs. Is it really a value? Is it something that you'd rather die than give up? If it's not, then you got to figure out how to overcome it. If it's just a belief system, you can overcome it.
Yeah, the thing that separates you and me from the animals is we can change our belief system. We can decide that I'm not going to believe that anymore.
That's right. Hyrum, we need to take a quick break, and we also need to go and do another segment. But stay with us, please. I want to talk to you more about changing his belief system in just a minute. Please stay with us. If you're a regular viewer of this show, or if you've read any of my books, you know that I advocate protection as the #1 priority for investors within 15 years of retirement. And protection starts by making a paradigm shift from focusing on a portfolio of growth instead to focusing on a portfolio of retirement income, which is why everything we've discussed here today has that income as a focus. In fact, in the end, it may be true that in order to achieve your simple retirement goals, you might just not need as much, relatively speaking, that is. But determining what you will need in terms of income is still essential if you really want a shot at achieving your goals. Once you realize that, you're on the right path for determining the best allocation to meet your income needs without running out of money. I know from experience that the whole concept of income first, growth second sounds counterintuitive to a lot of people. And that's partly because we've been taught that in order to increase our retirement income, we need to keep growing our portfolio and maximizing our returns. Naturally, that's what Wall Street wants you to believe. Why? because they're more likely to continue chasing capital gains in the risky stock market, in that case, helping you thinking, gee, the more my mutual fund grows, the greater my income. But the reality is that total return is really a sum of two things, growth plus income. The income portion comes in the form of interest and dividends, while growth is measured in terms of capital appreciation, buying something at this price and hoping that it grows to that price. Yet based on the misconception I just mentioned, many people believe that in order to increase returns, you must increase growth, and that the best way to do that is by staying invested in the stock market, even in turbulent times like this. In other words, these people have the idea that in order to increase your retirement income, you must increase your risk. And that's simply wrong. Why? Because as I discussed many times on the show, if your growth turns to shrinkage as a result of a major stock market plunge, your return also shrinks, and so does your income. So how then does focusing on income first change all of this? Well, when you're focused on income, you're typically investing in things designed to satisfy your income needs through interest and dividends, and to better protect your principal from market volatility and risk and shrinkage. So while increasing your portfolio growth might require increasing your risk, in my experience, increasing your retirement income starts with actually reducing your investment risk. And there's one more misconception about shifting your focus to income that I frequently run into, which is this. The idea that focusing on income before growth means you have to sacrifice growth. It doesn't. It simply means adopting a different approach to growth. More accurately, it means working with an advisor who specializes in income to create an actual growth strategy, as opposed to simply choosing investment options because a lot of outdated textbooks say they offer the most growth potential, which is why some advisors and many do-it-yourselfers approach it that way. They basically cross their fingers and toes, hoping to get growth. But to put it simply, with a strategic income-based approach, you have the potential to grow your portfolio the old-fashioned way, organically, by reinvesting the income you don't need in other income-based strategies. The result can be reasonable portfolio growth with far less risk and reliable interest and dividends generated, yes, in the range of 4%. Not 2.8, even in today's low interest rate environment. This approach can work especially well for couples and individuals whose retirement plans are simple. Why? Because they often find that their income needs do decrease once they downsize and move to more affordable communities. But because it is a specialized strategy, more often than not, it's also one that requires working with an advisor who specializes in these income-based strategies. We're back talking here with author Hyrum Smith. So Hyrum, again, I understand the belief system thing, but when someone gets value from their work, I can understand if they get value from possessions, how that has to be rewired. But when somebody's entire life they get value about work and their occupation, like this pilot, give me some keys of how people can rewire their brains when it comes to that.
Well, it all comes down to what I believe is the root cause of happiness. And for most people, for just about everybody really, the root cause of happiness is that I'm making a difference. I'm doing something that matters in the world. I'm doing something that really makes a difference and it matters to me. And so if I change my job, so what I say in the book is, retire from your job, that's fine. But if you retire to TV and golf, you're going to be dead in 3 years. And those are the stats, David.
Sure. So
why not? How now can I continue to make a difference so that I can value what I'm doing? And as long as I had the opportunity of hearing Winston Churchill speak 2 years before he died in 1963. And he said an interesting thing. He said, I've always been obsessed with the need to make a difference. And then he said, I hope I've made a difference. And I'm sitting there, I'm 19 years old, and I said, are you kidding? You saved the free world.
I know. Talk about somebody who made a difference. And now I understand why you said you wouldn't even consider retirement at 50 and 24 years. I get that. Hyrum, stay with us. We're going to be right back for another segment. We'll be back in a minute. You stay with us, too, for more words of wisdom from my new friend, Hyrum Smith. We're back talking with author and new friend of the income generation, Hyrum Smith. So I get that. You have to figure out what helps you, what gives you purpose in life beyond your employment. But now, how about the people that are addicted to all the material things? You know, Madison Avenue is more powerful than Wall Street in so many ways, and they're in the same city. So how do you break that, the materialism, the yuppie syndrome of people having to always have one up on their neighbor? How do you get people to break that?
Well, it's not easily broken, but I'll tell you, there's a new growth industry in America right now, and it's called garage sales. People are discovering that having stuff isn't what really matters. And it all comes back to your value system, you know, and one of the things I've taught forever is find out what you value most, and then ask yourself, are you doing something about it? For example, if I value being physically fit and I weigh 400 pounds, I'm in pain. Why? Because there's a gap between what I'm doing and what I value. And I talk about that in the book. And I think every human being has an innate desire to achieve inner peace. Inner peace comes from doing what matters most to you. If you haven't decided what matters most to you, then you're adrift. So you've got to sit down, and I ask people to write their own constitution. Put your values in writing. Sure. And then ask yourself, are there any gaps in my life? And I'll tell you, everybody has gaps.
Of course.
And when you're working on closing the gaps, inner peace comes, and you know what? You're making a difference. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I think it sounds like most people actually on their own realize at a certain point in life that it's not all about the stuff, which is really good. So I've got to ask you this, okay? In about the last minute or so we have left, I'd like you to share some thoughts about time management. You know, you're the guru on time management for working folks. So now in 60 seconds or less, tell us about time management as a retiree.
Well, I think the thing we've got to remember is that time management has nothing to do with a clock. Time management is all about making choices. What we need to remember is that every person on the planet has the exact same amount of time. You and I have the same amount of time that Warren Buffett has. That'd probably make you mad, but we all have the same amount of time. So when you hear someone say, I don't have time, they're not telling the truth. What they're really saying is, I value something else more. Time management, David, is nothing more than you making the choices every day that you're going to do what matters most to you.
Making the list of your values, your beliefs, and making sure that, frankly, everything that you do, that you give priority in terms of time, is in line with those values and beliefs, not in conflict with them.
Absolutely.
Hyrum, it's been great. It's been great having you today. I wish we had more time. I really do, because I could talk to you about this for a long time. I'm a big advocate of purposeful retirement, but I want to give a quick screenshot here for your book, Purposeful Retirement, okay, from our good friend, Hyrum Smith. Hyrum, thanks again.
Thank you, David. Nice to talk to you.
I'd like to thank both our guests for joining us today for another episode of The Income Generation. I also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. You know, in my 30-plus years as a financial advisor, I've learned that most people have similar goals for retirement, to a certain degree. Yeah, there are a few who want to travel the world or buy multiple vacation homes or maybe the yacht they've always dreamt of, but most have much simpler plans and priorities. The majority of people do intend to do some traveling, maybe take a few cruises or visit some of the places they've always wanted to go. But beyond some of those bucket list items, most people are looking forward to slowing down, devoting more time to the hobbies and activities that they love, and spending quality time with family and friends. And for a certain group of people, that's really all they want. They spent years traveling for work. They purchased everything they've ever needed and didn't need. Now they want nothing more than to shed as much of that baggage as possible and to settle down into a very small, simple retirement. And that's great, but as we've learned from today's show, even the humblest of retirement goals can be jeopardized by complacency, falling into the mindset, I don't need much. Just because your retirement goals are relatively modest is a potential danger to be aware of and a potential danger to avoid. In my experience, your odds of successfully achieving your retirement goals, big or small, improve dramatically by following the right process. It starts with identifying your specific retirement goals and with analyzing your finances from the top down to determine just how much retirement income you'll actually need. then it's all about shifting your focus from growth to income and to financial strategies designed to protect your principal and generate income through interest and dividends, and to provide an opportunity to grow your portfolio organically, or as I like to say, the old-fashioned way. Thanks for watching. Bottom line is, if you're close to retirement and really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it on the income generation. I'm David Scranton, and thanks again. We'll see you next week. If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. We'll see you all next Sunday.